it's not as bad as what we're going to have in Canada or what we're going to have here it's not as
Yeah.
bad in New York.
Yeah, I know not really, not really. Not as bad. Yeah.
Good to have you, and I'm glad you are able to make it this time around. Let me start the recording
Hmm.
because I know it's very late over there, and I don't want to keep you um, waiting. And also, I'm running this live on Zoom, on
Okay.
YouTube, on
Oh,
YouTube,
on YouTube. Okay.
on YouTube. Yeah. So we are live on YouTube.
Okay.
Uh, Thank you very much. I don't want to waste much of your time. I'm glad you are able to make it. And to those who are listening to us, last week, my guest speaker could not make it, but I'm glad that is able to make it, today. So let me say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, to our esteemed participant, joining us from across the globe on YouTube. Again, it is my great pleasure to welcome you, to this insightful conversation on security and AI policy and governance. We know that AI is reshaping global security, policy frameworks, and economic landscape. Raising critical questions about governance, the ethical use, and strategic competition. So, and again, today, we're going to explore key aspects of AI governance, including takeaway from the Paris AI Summit, the global AI race between China and the USA and Europe, and most importantly, the opportunity for Africa in a downstream application. So before I dive in, to introduce our guest speaker of today, I would like to introduce Ogun Security Research and Strategic Consulting. OSRS is a leading cybersecurity and intelligence consulting firm, dedicated to helping organizations navigate their complex security challenges. We specialize in cybersecurity research, cloud security assessment, AI governance, and cybercrime investigation, ensuring that businesses and governments stay ahead of emerging threat while maintaining compliance with global regulation. So, if your organization is looking for expert guidance on AI security and governance, we are here to support you. Now, again, I'm particularly honored, to introduce my distinguished guest, Ayantola Alayande, a Ph.D. candidate in international development and AI governance at Oxford University and public policy researcher at Global Center of AI Governance. I think I'm correct with that, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Cool. Thank you.
So, Tola's expertise spans AI governance, international development, and public policy with a focus on the global implication of artificial intelligence. So, Tola is deeply involved in shaping AI regulatory frameworks and policies, particularly in emerging economics, and his research addresses the intersection of AI governance, international development. I've been following his work all this while. I saw him growing from University of Badon, and I'm also proud of him. His work at the Global Center of AI Governance highlight his commitment to ethical and responsible AI adoption, globally. So for our discussion today, is relevant both, and timely as well. As AI evolves, government and business and security experts must also develop robust governance frameworks that balance innovation, security, and ethical consideration. So we address critical questions, ranging from how do different regions approach AI regulation, what lessons can be learned from the Paris AI Summit, right? How can African nation harness AI potential for economic and technological growth? So, and that's what I want to discuss with Tola, and I'm excited to hear your insight on these pressing issues. So, for those who are listening to us, we encourage you to engage actively. Also, take note and reflect on how this discussion impact your field of work as well. Now, to begin, let's discuss intersection of AI security. As I've mentioned earlier on, AI is transforming industry, but also introduces new security challenges that demand strong governance. Tola, based on your expertise, how do you see AI governance evolving over the next 5 years?
All right, yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, sir. It's my pleasure to be here. So I mean, I think it's kind of difficult to answer in terms of, I mean, it's not difficult to answer. It's just kind of hard to actually predict where exactly AI governance would be in the next 5 years. If you had asked this question, say a couple of months ago, the answer could have been different,
Yeah.
and that tells you how fast this space is moving. And this is not just about AI, really. I think AI obviously doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists, especially when we talk about the international relations of, I mean, how countries relate in terms of, developing AI systems and governing it. AI doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within the geopolitics of our time. And which is why I referenced, if you had asked this question just 2, 3 months ago, the answer could have been different for so many reasons. We are all aware of the geopolitical landscape or climate we are in right now. There's I'll say huge rollback of some of the progresses we have seen in multilateral governance in the last few years, and
Mhm.
that is telling not just for AI, obviously, but for technology governance generally. So this is why I say it's difficult to answer. I mean, obviously, there have been like so many progress in the last few years. We had 2 years ago, we had the Bletchley Park Agreement, we had the UK AI Safety Summit, which sort of marked an entry into interstate cooperation in terms of governing AI for global good. And that was obviously followed by the AI Safety Summit in Seoul in 2024. We've had the Global Digital Compact at the level of the UN, which all of this is sort of the multilateral, multi-stakeholder, multi-state work to ensure that AI works for the good of everyone, especially in terms of closing the inequality and global divide that these systems would further have caused. But obviously, we are seeing a different body language now. I mean, there's always been cutthroat competition in the field, but it's just that now this is coming at a higher scale than we've anticipated. Obviously, with some of the um, strong support for big techs, which I mean, that we're seeing from the White House and some of the responses from China as well, and even
Mhm.
the EU, gearing up itself to be competitive in the field.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, it's a good thing for innovation. The problem is we tend to, I mean, the way states go about these things tend to be less cognizant of some of the most important risks, especially to people who are marginalized, to people who don't have as much of a voice in governance and setting the rules. So it's kind of hard to say whether we'll be in a good place. But I also don't want to be a prophet of doom either. So I think in the next 5 years, we'll see a lot more cutthroat competition. There will be some progress in terms of regulation and governance at the state level. I'm not sure whether we'll be reaching a good consensus at the international level. And obviously, in the next 5 years, we'll be seeing more massive advancements in AI development, really, more than policy could catch up with. So I
And
think
that,
that's what I'll say. Yeah.
yeah, let me put this. You're already going towards where I'm heading towards.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. Let's say AI security policies vary across regions. I mean, what are those key governance models that nations should adopt to ensure responsible AI use?
Hmm. I mean, I think so generally there are there's a lot there are thousands of AI governance documents and models out there, like even in the US alone. I mean, surprising people would say, oh, the US is more laissez-faire when it comes to regulation, but the US actually has some of the most comprehensive AI regulation regimes in the world. At the state level, you've got so many
Maybe
big.
yeah.
Yeah, so there are thousands of them, but the truth is, I think there are general principles we all sort of kind of all subscribe to how AI should be responsible. I mean, building responsible systems, ethical systems, safe systems, and there are obviously a couple of checklists within that. I can't think of any on top of my head, but I know the Global Data Compact is one. When in 2018, I think 2019, the UN did set up an high level panel on, on AI. Some of these initiatives have actually put forward solid proposition. The UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI is also a big one, which actually I think it's probably the most comprehensive multi-state not to say multi-state, multi-stakeholder agreement so far, which a lot of countries have actually signed up to. Obviously, it remains how countries follow through these, how they emulate or I'll say mirror this in their national AI strategies on one hand, but also secondly, how they sort of engage in some of the key principles that are outlined in the recommendation. To follow up on that, I know UNESCO is doing a good job doing something it calls readiness assessment methodology, which is basically its framework for helping countries kind of mapping the landscape of AI in different countries, which the Global Center on AI governance has been hugely involved in this, especially in Africa, to help countries kind of understand how to prepare, obviously baseline, knowing what's going on in the AI sector, but also kind of understand how to get the system or the landscape, to the place where it's sort of aligning with some of the recommendations in the UNESCO ethics document. So lots of stuff out there really. At the African level, the African Union Continental Strategy, which we have also supported at the Global Center on AI Governance and the African Observatory, has some really good blueprint to think about AI, especially in terms of risks that are peculiar to the African continent. Obviously, this is not a hard law nor a regulations. It's a strategy document. But for African countries, it's a good starting point. And also, so many countries do have their national regulations. Nigeria, for example, well, maybe doesn't have particularly an AI law or AI regulation, but does have a draft strategy. So I think there are hundreds of stuff out there. Even civil society organizations come up with different policies. One thing I'll say though is that it's always not straitjacketed, right? There are so many ways you could approach this. Like even in the UK, years ago, I mean, it used to be that there were just so many, just businesses would generally be confused about which AI policy or regulations they should really adopt. So what you find is, I don't know if I think this was
So
2022 or
you said
2020.
they have to tailor it to their needs and what they are doing, right?
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
that's great. Before we move into Paris AI Summit takeaway, now you mentioned something, and I want to follow up on that. What role do ethical AI framework play in securing AI application? Now you talk about ethics. So
yeah.
what role do you think it should play in securing AI applications? No, considering how nation state actors, and organization we use AI. Recently, Google just dropped, the weaponization, from their AI pledge policy. So, what role do ethical AI frameworks play in securing AI applications?
Yeah, I think a lot. There's a lot we can think about.
I mean,
Um,
just Mhm.
one is that a lot of these frameworks actually focus on specific principles. I mean, some of them have so many different acronyms you can think of, safety, and many others I can't remember. But there are consistent things across the different frameworks, right? So one of that is data privacy. I think data privacy is one thing everyone seems to kind of come to an agreement on. And that's because, AI poses very peculiar risks for data. These systems are trained on large tools of
Yeah,
data, right? And even when anonymized, there's a concept we call re-identification, which is that it's very possible to still identify individuals based on specific characteristics, even if not individuals, specific groups of people, right? So some of these principles outline things that, when adhered to, actually can help us build systems that are secure and safe. So data privacy is one thing. You've got rules on bias and discrimination as well, which is kind of a classic one everyone talks about.
that's a
But
whole that's a whole topic on that we
yeah, which
want to go. You want to go into that part? Let's quickly jump into Paris Summit. Take away. I know if you are not there in person, I know some of your part of your team. They were there. I could not make it anyway.
yeah.
The Paris AI Summit brought together global leaders to discuss all what we have been talking about: AI governance,
Mm,
the dominance,
Mm,
So, Tola, what were the most significant outcome of that summit?
mm. I think there were a lot of things in the Paris AI Summit, which obviously so the one for me that's is really good is the launch of the International AI Safety Report, which you've had a multi-stakeholder team working on it actually for the last couple of months. So the report is put together by a lot of stakeholders across I think 30 countries. And really, this sort of helps to aggregate different perspectives on AI capabilities and risks. It's sort of like a working document for government to think about AI systems. One thing for me, though, thinking about not just the document, but the entire process, which is the classic challenge with this kind of gatherings, is the limited representation of global South countries, right? Obviously,
That-
you have
that's what I'm going to. Thank you for, sorry for cutting you. So,
absolutely.
I was looking at the agreement. Do you think the agreement made at the summit will shape AI policy in emerging economies? I mean, in uh, particularly in Africa, or talk about global South in general.
I mean, personally, to be frank, I think many the truth is when it comes to non-binding agreement, this is a non-binding agreement, by the way. When it comes to non-binding agreements like this, they are what I call symbolic politics. So just countries just come together and sign this bunch of stuff, which obviously some private sector companies would have huge interest in. I mean, the very responsible ones, or some states would see it as a good template, but it's not really binding on anyone, to be honest. And that's a weakness of the global governance landscape or regime that we
Do
find.
you see any unexpected position from global leaders on AI regulation?
Yeah, so it's been a mix of I mean, but like just to kind of still go on the good things before I come to some of the more critical stuff. I think obviously it has a lot of good output. So one is the publishing of that report. I think the second thing is obviously there's a huge trend towards public investment in AI. I think this is a good thing. A lot of people have been advocating for this for a while. I know Dan Coyle has been a great proponent of this. Basically, she's been arguing we need to have a kind of public interest AI system. They think of how we've got the BBC in the UK that's essentially owned by government, was kind of pushed ahead by government investment, and that's how, for example, the space sector in the US came to actually blossom really. So the summit did a good job in that, and there's a launch of it's called the current AI, so hundreds of millions of dollars in investment. This
Mhm.
build public interest AI system. The EU particularly is put, I think, over 200 or 300 billion euros into that. Some of that would actually build facilities in the EU. Obviously, a lot of this is self-sufficiency, right? To help the EU build compute systems, semiconductor manufacturing, and all of those things. Um, there's an environmental sustainability coalition that emerged out of the summit. Obviously, there's huge, widespread disappointment around the framing. So the framing is sort of shifting from just environmental sustainability more to like, energy basically. So the language is just like kind of more securitized, right? So it's saying we need to build, systems that are, energy efficient, all this kind of stuff. But there are some obviously the final statement itself, which is on building inclusive, ethical, and environmentally sustainable AI. These are some very good output from the summit. There are some not so encouraging ones. Obviously, the US and the UK didn't sign the agreement on grounds that the inclusion of the word inclusive and sustainable does not serve their national strategic interest. And you could see where that's going, obviously, in terms of adopting that kind of stuff probably comes with the comes with the doubt. Maybe doubt is not the right word, but it comes with it's a bit of skepticism around it's just I don't want to say like it's just flat on
Anyway,
one.
we will get to that part of the AI race, but at this point, I would like to remind our audience about Togun Security Research and Strategic Consulting. So, as AI security becomes a top priority, organizations need expert guidance on AI governance, cybersecurity, and compliance. And that's why we are bringing experts. So we provide cutting-edge consulting service to business, government, and institutions looking to implement AI responsibly and securely. If you need tailored solution, so I mean, we'll be your trusted partner. And Tola, the race for AI dominance is shaping the global economy. You know, um, how do China, the USA, and Europe differ in their AI strategy?
Hmm. I think that's a big question.
Or let's say which region is currently leading, and what factors contribute to their success?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say which region is leading. Do you mean in terms of AI development or governance?
AI development.
Well, yeah, AI
It's
development.
a big risk. I mean, among superpowers,
Yeah,
China want to be the AI leader for the world,
I
and
mean,
they put
undoubtedly in terms of AI development, that's the US. That's incontrovertible. Um, but the thing is, the debate is a lot more nuanced than that. In that. Obviously the US leads in terms of, developing cutting edge models, powerful AI systems. Um, but we need to kind of think about this in the long run, right? And this is a debate I had with one of my lecturers last week where I'd said, well, basically I think, China is lagging behind in the US in terms of AI development. And, made a very important point around it depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking at models and outputs, certainly you think of the US and even with compute, right? It's I mean, we always think of the US because like, oh, it's got all the, it has access to, critical supply chain networks of, semiconductors, for example, or just GPUs generally. But when it comes to energy, actually, and power, which will be very crucial for AI, it will be so important. Energy, power, critical minerals that would, obviously go into your compute systems. China is leading in this, right? But again, leading is kind of a very dicey word to use depending on exactly on really on what you
okay, let's look at it from
you
this
also have
point.
to think about cost efficiency, right? Which is a very big thing. DeepSeek is a big lesson for all of us in that. I mean, like how getting just 10, a group of 10 to 20 researchers together who are able to do what you the US needs hundreds of or thousands of people to do
To
in
do.
less than the time in 6 months and probably 1/3 of the cost. I think this changes the conversation a lot in terms.
Number 10, we have to look at quality as well. But
Yeah.
let me put it this way. Do you foresee a unified global AI standard? Or
I,
will regional differences persist?
I mean, regional differences will certainly persist because, like, one thing One, so when we talk about AI policy, the mistake we tend to make, especially those of us working in AI governance, like we try to treat it as something. I mean, AI is very exceptional. It's peculiar in so many different ways. But the frameworks and the thinking around how governments respond to it basically don't change, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same cutthroat competition we see with EV. EV competition, so semiconductors itself, like which is not just peculiar to AI, right? Semiconductors are using all types of, ICT hardwares, and even energy generally. So I don't foresee a coalesce of interest generally. That's simply because history tells us that's not been the case in so many things. There are only very few things countries have, and again, that depends on how you're defining cooperation, right? But I guess I suppose the point you're trying to make is whether there would be one standard system.
Standard.
For example, the way we have the CER and the CERN
Mhm.
for the regulation of nuclear weapons. I don't
Correct.
think that's happening. I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Okay,
Again, the
that's great.
nuclear weapon points, yeah,
Yeah. Now let's shift
yeah,
focus to Africa.
yeah,
The looking at AI potential in Africa. We know AI offers significant opportunity, but adoption remains very
yeah.
slow in Africa.
Mhm.
So, Tola, what do you think? What are the key challenges preventing Africa from fully leveraging AI? Because at downstream, if you cannot even play the game at upstream, so
Downstream,
yeah,
yeah.
what do we do at downstream? So, what are the key challenges?
I mean, like the obviously the upstream challenge itself is worth discussing, right? How
Mm,
much can you really benefit from it when you really don't have a skin in the game in terms of actually developing the technologies, right? It's just a consumer. I think there's a lot of optimism on the part of African countries. The challenges remain the same. It's just our classic development
mhm,
challenges, will not, which will still hinder AI development.
mm,
The obvious one is talent. even though I think we're not where we used to be. I mean, I'm very familiar with the Nigerian context, for example. There's been, we've done well in terms of developing technical talent in the country. And in terms of exporting this as well, we've become an outsourcing, one of the outsourcing capitals of the world, especially in the global south. But the problem is AI, when it comes to AI, there'll be specific skills, right? And Nigeria has a very large digital divide, right? I mean, I think over 50% of the population doesn't have access to the internet. So you're talking about people who don't even have basic digital literacy skills, not to talk of new skills that would be required to cope in an
Infrastructure is one of the major problems we face in
infrastructure
Africa.
is certainly a
And
big
when
problem.
you see what role should government and the private sector play in supporting AI growth in our continent? We've seen all these fine documents. We always copy and paste. We've
Yeah,
gone through this and other. We've come out with our policy as well. Nigeria's also come out with robust, policy frameworks and everything.
yeah.
So, role should government and private sector play at this point in time, so
I
that we're
think
not going to be left behind?
Yeah, I think I'm going to pick it from the infrastructure point you've made, right? Which is very crucial, right? So this is one area where private sector and the government could work together, especially if you think about, building, data centers, investment in computer and all this kind of technical, manufacturing facilities. Private sector has the money, government has the mechanisms or frameworks to de-risk capital. And I think this is where we need to be working together, but not just to kind of gloss over other some of the other challenges, right? Which is the point I was trying to make in terms of talent. Is that we need to be deliberate, and this is not just about AI now. We need to be deliberate about human capital development on the continent, right? Because it's AI today is going to be another buzzword tomorrow. We're going to keep racing to want to upskill in that direction. How about you get people to have the basic critical skills that would be needed in the workforce, right? I think this is where we should be heading to. And obviously, yeah, the point on infrastructure. I think generally, I mean, there's a global move towards it, right? I think the UN at some point was raising the idea of a global fund for AI. I'm not sure how far they've gone with that, but this is basically think of this as maybe a global polio fund or some other emergency funds where private sector interests will be put together, philanthropists, everyone comes together and pull money, especially to then cover the gaps in developing countries or places that are left behind. I think it's a very excellent idea. I think the African Union strategy as well does highlight some of these things. Um, I'm not sure what name he calls it, but there's a component of it which looks at, I think the very final lap of the scheme looks at, international cooperation in AI. And this is not just in governance, but actually in AI development. So bring in private sector, philanthropy money, everyone together, right? So think of this as a critical sector um, where a gap needs to be filled. But I think this for Africa, especially given the current landscape we are in international development, where there's a huge rollback of aid, I think this must come internally.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. As we look ahead, AI governance and security remain critical topics. And Tola, what major governance challenges do you foresee in the next decade? How can nations collaborate to ensure AI security? I mean, without uh, stifling innovation. Because one of the reasons the current administration in the United States will not want to put so much regulation on AI is to ensure it's not to stifling innovation. So,
yeah,
what advice will you give to policymakers shaping AI regulations today?
yeah. I think the point on non-stifling innovation is really, really important. Um, so there are two questions I see here. One is like, what are the challenges I foresee? There are a
Yeah.
lot of challenges. I think the first one is, like you said, the point on regulation. There'll be too many regulations at some point, and not because there are too many regulations essentially, but because there are just too many stuff out there. What companies would begin to do, especially they'll begin to do something that's called, just adopting the highest common denominator. Like, what are the basic stuff that are kind of common across any type of governance framework, like things around data privacy. Obviously, even within data privacy, there would be different levels. So countries would just go for what I call the bare minimum, right? Companies, sorry, would go for the bare minimum, and that's a challenge because there are places you want more comprehensive attention to the frameworks. The second thing is obviously policy arbitrage, right? And this goes both ways. So companies taking advantage of loopholes in AI policies in particular countries to be able to, So, for example, whether if a country wanted to invest in Rwanda, for example, and it finds, oh, actually, Kenya has some nicer policies that makes it cheaper for us to employ labor, we're going to go to Kenya instead. So, what I call bigger than neighbor policies, that's going to happen because if you don't have cooperation, that's bound to happen. The third thing, obviously, is that there's going to be a lot of greenwashing. We already ethics washing. Sorry, we already have greenwashing with ESGs. That's going to happen in AI as well. Is that people just entities would just probably not care. Like it's just going to be a lot of checklist.
Mm,
We need to have a very healthy balance of um, not doing away with governance just because we want innovation to happen, right?
mm,
There are many creative ways we could go about this. I think countries need to develop unique strategies and governance, but at the same time, we need to keep having these conversations in a way that's maybe not necessarily binding. Sometimes you can't force countries, states, especially to um, adopt some of these multilateral frameworks, but in a way that shows huge and strong interest, that signals, the private sector as well. And I think a good example is even the Paris AI Summit itself. Some companies have responded, basically kind of embracing the idea of, better frameworks. Anthropic, for example, is one. So yeah, I think there's a lot to expect when it
mm.
comes to AI governance.
Anyway,
The
I try as much as possible to keep this conversation within 30 minutes, but we are 5 minutes over.
Yeah,
And as we conclude, I want to sincerely thank you. I always like to call you Ayantola instead of calling you Tola.
yes.
Ayantola Alayande, for sharing this valuable insight on AI governance,
Mm.
security, and global AI race. Your expertise has provided us with a deeper understanding of the challenges and opportunity in AI policy. And to some of our audience, for those who will watch this later, AI governance is not just about policy. It's about ensuring AI serves humanity responsibly, ethically, and securely. Whether we're looking at AI, security threat, the competition between global powers or Africa's role in AI innovation, one thing remains clear. The future of AI governance depends on proactive policies and strategic collaboration. And again, before we close, I would like to remind everyone that for us, Ogun Security Research and Strategic Consulting, we're your trusted partner in AI governance, cybersecurity research, and regulatory compliance. If your organization is navigating AI risk, security challenges, or compliance issues, we are here to provide expert guidance. So you can visit us and learn how we can support your security and AI governance need. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion. Tola, I'm proud of you. Once again, thank you for your time and expertise. And I look forward again, to continue this important conversation on AI, security and governance. Again, thank you, everyone, and I appreciate, your honoring our invitation.
Thank you so much. All right, sir.
Just one moment, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the time.
I think let me stay on.